Destination Medicine is a collaborative initiative of regional training hubs. With first-hand lessons learned from those who have gone before, this podcast is designed to assist and inspire anyone interested in pursuing a medical career in rural and regional Australia.
Welcome to Destination Medicine. I'm Nicole Goodman. It was a friendship struck up with an Australian colleague in Britain, and then a trial placement in rural New South Wales that led Dr. Robin Williams and his family to move here permanently. He's now happily ensconced in Molong, population 1,700, in the Central West of the state, splitting his work time between the local hospital and his general practice. Dr. Williams is living the dream of a varied and engaging professional life that provides cradle-to-the-grave care for his patients and basking under what he calls Australia's big skies. He talks to Jeff Waters about how, most importantly, he's proud of the support he provides to keep his community thriving. But he starts by recounting why it is he decided to become a doctor.
When I was sort of 15, 16, I just had a chat with my father and he said, well, what about the law? What about finance? And I decided I actually wanted to do something that was useful to other people. Not wishing to disparage those professions, obviously, but I felt it was more important to do something that was a real benefit to our fellow man and womankind. So I had to make a decision to do the sciences because at that stage, to get into medical school in Britain, which was usually at 18, 19, you usually had to do physics and chemistry, biology or maths. So even though I was more interested at 15, 16 in history, geography and economics, I switched to do physics, chemistry and biology and was fortunate enough to do well enough to get into medical school in London, in Charing Cross Hospital, a green new doctor.
Well, you're very fortunate to be bright enough to swap to subjects that you weren't that interested in but still do well enough to qualify for medicine. That's amazing. Well done.
Well, I think a part of that too was that at that stage in the UK, especially the London schools, they always interviewed and they always used to look for people who just weren't always real academic high performers, but maybe more generalists. And I think that's probably, I don't think you need to be Einstein to do medicine, but I think it probably helps if you can talk to people.
And speaking of generalists, what was it that influenced you to choose general practice?
I think that as soon as we started to hit the wards in medical school, which is year 3 of the curriculum, it's sciences to the first 2 years, and then you go on the ward in the 3rd, 4th and 5th year and rotate through different specialities. And what made me think the general practice thing for me was I liked the idea of being a cradle-to-the-grave doctor, getting to know my patients longitudinally rather than episodic, which is what specialities are all about. Specialists see people, they've got a problem, they fix that problem, and then they're discharged. Whereas I like the idea of actually getting to know my patients over a number of years, seeing where they fitted in their communities and their families, and also the huge variety. The variety in general practice is you never know what's going to come in through the door. So consequently, it's a great challenge, and I really enjoyed that sort of the rigour that you can apply to that to really think about what you're dealing with in front of you. That's what I really like to talk to people.
And how would you describe your current role?
Very much as it was really when I started. When I did my training in London, I went straight back to Wales and did my first house jobs there. I did a GP training scheme, which I went through a variety of different disciplines. So my paediatrics and my obstetrics and gynecology, general medicine, bit of psychiatry, bit of emergency, some clinics in dermatology, ophthalmology and ENT, as well as 2 practices where I did general practice. And that gave me a wide range of experience, and I'm still using that now in dealing with basically anything that comes in through the door. And I also think, living rurally, it is an ageing population that we have. So consequently, it's inevitable, really, that we have more older patients to look after, which is I thoroughly enjoy because you can always learn something new from older members of our society.
Speaking of living in the country, what was it that brought you to Australia, Robin?
Well, I went into medical school, as I said, straight from school. So I qualified as a doctor at 23. By the time I'd done my intern years and my 3 years of general practice training, that took me to 27. By then, I was married to Nicola, and she was a registered nurse. I was just turning 28. We weren't ready to settle down for what we at that time thought would be the next 35 years in one locality. So we thought, why don't we travel a bit? And my registrar, when I did obstetrics, was an Australian doing his post-fellowship position as a senior registrar in North Wales. And in the middle of the night, while we were, he was doing the Caesars and I was assisting, we talk and he said, well, why don't you have a year in Australia before you come and settle down? So we came out and did 6 months in Dubbo at the base hospital there, which is where that specialist was. And then at that time, at the end of those 2 terms, they sent me out to smaller towns like Gulgong and Dunedoo, where I locumed, to give relief to the GPs who were going away on leave. And we both, Nicola and I, loved the Central West. And so when we went back, which was at the end of 1986, kept on, grey mornings in Wales, you'd look out and think, and you sort of keep on imagining the big skies in Dubbo, which were invariably blue. So by then we had 2 young children and we came back in 1992 on a sabbatical back to Gulgong, which I worked with Glenys Caterson there originally and then came back for 6 months before our children were ready to go to school. Loved it again. So we had a bit of wrangling to get through some of the paperwork. So in 1997, we actually emigrated. And by then we had a 3rd child, Ellen, who's now up in Brisbane. So our little family of Nicola and myself, son Rhys and our daughters Leah and Ellen, we emigrated to Gulgong in 1997 and thoroughly enjoyed our 10 years there before we moved on to Molong about 16 years ago.
Why Molong? What is it about Molong that you like so much?
Well, we were driving through Molong for a flute lesson. Our middle daughter Leah is a flautist, and we were travelling to Dubbo every week for flute lessons. And her teacher moved to Grafton, so she didn't have a flute teacher in Dubbo. And Nicola Schnecker, who is a world-renowned flautist and lives in just outside Molong, agreed to take Leah on while we got ourselves sorted out with a teacher in Orange. And every time we came over to Molong, we'd pass the hospital. And Nicola said, well, if you want to, why don't we start a practice in Molong where you can still have your hospital, which I really enjoy. We can live between Molong and Orange. The girls can go to school. We're not having to board. And see how it goes. So in the end of 2006, we moved. I travelled back to Gulgong for a few months while we wound things up there. And then I started a practice from scratch in Molong in July of 2007. And it's a great community to work in. The hospital is a fantastic facility. It's had an upgrade in recent years. So I'm able to practice what I really love, which is this cradle to the grave medicine. And I'm able to look after my patients. Obviously, really complicated patients we send through to Orange. But if you've got a community-acquired pneumonia or an elderly patient that's got a little bit of delirium, you can put them into Molong, look after them there. And it's a great form of general practice. I really enjoy that side, the hospital, as well as the practice-based work.
And Robin, what's the most rewarding thing for you about working as a rural GP or VMO?
I think the real thing about it is that you really feel that you're making a difference to your community. If we weren't here to look after our community, then our patients would have to travel. Well, in the case of Yeovil, they'd have to travel 40-odd k's to Wellington. In Molong, they'd have to travel into Orange. And the farmers and other workers who make Molong their home, they produce the food which goes onto the table of our city folk. And they need equity of access, they need good medical care, and they really are pleased that we are able to provide that, and they're able to carry on doing their work, which is vital in the national interest, and that we don't end up just siloing everything into the bigger towns. But also, on a clinical side, you can pick up such interesting medicine or do interesting medicine because you're not just referring on to specialists or just writing prescriptions, as I think the metro GPs end up doing, because a lot of GPs there are just expected to refer on to the big tertiary centres. We, as GPs in the country, actually are the generalists of the past. We see everything. We have to manage a lot ourselves, with a lot of support from our specialty colleagues in Orange and Dubbo. But I think we do more of the interesting stuff.
Are there any other areas of medicine you've sought additional training in that adds to your everyday practice?
Well, as I said, when I first started, I had a pretty robust training. On top of all of that, a lot of my colleagues do go into sort of subspeciality. My subspeciality, if you like, has been on more of the governance side of things. So non-clinical work, strategic thinking. So I sat on a number of boards from the Rural Doctors Network I've chaired. Also, the Dubbo Plains Division of General Practice, I chaired that too. And also the Western New South Wales Local Health District, which is state government and looks after all the hospitals. I was chair of that for 6 years. And now I'm a chair of the Primary Health Network for Western New South Wales. And that's very, very enjoyable work. It's a strategic side of things, and it's about whole of system. And I find that really is a great challenge. It allows me to use a totally different side of my brain, I think, than call it that.
Can you tell me a bit about the virtual rural generalist service and how it supports your work?
That's an absolute lifesaver, because at the moment I'm the only visiting medical officer in Molong, and because of the demands of on-call and getting up in the middle of the night, I'm getting to the stage in my life where I would not be able to do hospital work if I didn't have the VGRS to support us. So I look after my inpatients 4 days a week, round the clock, and I also look after the emergency department 4 days a week in hours. And then the rest of the week, at the moment, I'm having to go in every day and do my ward round, but once I've done that work and cleared up whatever's in emergency, I'm off, which means I can still have a family life. I can still do normal things without the phone going all the time, and certainly the on-call. Now with VGRS, you can have time, you can have downtime, you can avoid burnout. And I think if we didn't have the virtual system in place, I would have had to say a long time ago, I can't do the hospital as well, because it's just going to burn me out.
What sort of personal qualities do you think are advantageous to working in general practice?
I think you've got to like people. And I think, a lot of, if you don't like the story of your patients and understand what you're there for, I don't think you can really be a good general practitioner. You've got to be really good at listening rather than giving out advice because you're the professional. I'm a great believer in the adage that, if you let patients talk for long enough, they'll give you the answer of what's wrong with them.
What advice would you give to a JMO considering a career as a GP?
I think you've got to know what you're coming into, and I think that a lot of newer doctors probably don't realise how all-consuming general practice can become, but the rewards of doing it well are huge as well.
Dr. Robin Williams, GP at Molong Hospital in New South Wales. This is Destination Medicine. Thanks for listening.
Regional training hubs are supported by funding from the Australian Government under the Rural Health Multidisciplinary Training Program.